Snowboarding has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My parents, both former competitive snowboarders, instilled their love for the sport in me and my siblings before we even knew how to tie our shoelaces properly. Every winter, the mountains became our playground, and I grew up associating the crisp chill of snow-laden air with freedom and adrenaline. By the time I was 23 and finishing my last year of college, snowboarding wasn't just a hobby. It was practically second nature. This particular story took place a couple of winters ago during a trip to New Hampshire with my closest friends. Henry, the planner of the group, was the mastermind behind this adventure. If it wasn't for him, our loosely organized friend circle would probably have spent the break binging Netflix instead of carving through fresh powder. Noah, on the other hand, handled logistics like securing the SUV and navigating the snowy roads. I don't recall exactly which mountain we visited, probably Cannon Mountain, but its sheer size and beauty made an indelible mark on my memory. From the base, the mountain looked like a scene from a postcard. Massive pine trees blanketed in snow stood like silent sentinels, and the chairlifts seemed to stretch endlessly upward into the mist-covered peaks. The air was so cold it felt sharp, cutting through the layers of our jackets and leaving faint trails of frost on our scarves. The trail network was immense, with dozens of runs ranging from beginner-friendly bunny slopes to terrifying double black diamonds that seemed designed for daredevils with a death wish. We spent 2 full days exploring, yet I'm certain we didn't even scratch the surface. By the second day, we had already found our favorites, trails that offered the perfect balance of challenge and thrill. That morning, the excitement among us was almost palpable. Henry, always the instigator, suggested we push ourselves and tackle some of the mountain's tougher trails. Fueled by the prospect of new challenges and the adrenaline rush that came with them, we eagerly agreed. "Time to see who the real snowboarder is," Henry declared with a smirk as he pulled out a small flask. Inside was whiskey, which he insisted would warm us up. The sharp burn of the liquor mixed with the freezing air created an exhilarating contrast. It wasn't the smartest choice, but in that moment it felt rebellious and fun, just a group of college kids living in the moment. The slopes grew steeper as we ventured further up the mountain. Each turn was a calculated risk, each descent a leap of faith. My heart raced as I leaned into the board, carving through icy patches and launching off small mounds of snow. There was a rhythm to it, a dance with the mountain. The crisp wind tore at my face, and the world blurred around me, reduced to nothing but the snow beneath my board and the endless sky above. At one point, Noah and I raced side by side down a particularly challenging trail. The sound of our boards slicing through the snow was almost hypnotic. Henry followed close behind, shouting playful insults as we zigzagged past trees and narrowly avoided an icy drop-off. "Watch out, rookies! I'm coming for you," he yelled, his laughter echoing through the frosty air. We reached the bottom of the run breathless but exhilarated. My legs burned from the effort, but the rush was addictive. Without hesitation, we hopped back on the chairlift, eager for another go. By noon, the whiskey had been emptied, and we were fully immersed in the thrill of the mountain. As the day wore on, the weather began to shift. The once clear sky grew overcast, and a fine mist of snow began to fall. It wasn't enough to obscure our vision, but it lent an eerie stillness to the landscape. The trails became quieter, the distant hum of other snowboarders fading as we ventured further up the mountain. Henry, always one to chase adventure, suggested we try a trail that wasn't marked on the map. "It's probably a backcountry run," he said, pointing to a narrow path leading into the trees. "You're not scared, are you?" "Of course not," I replied, my voice more confident than I felt. Backcountry trails were notoriously unpredictable, often filled with hidden obstacles and unmarked hazards. But the lure of the unknown was too tempting to resist. Noah hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky. "Are you sure? We don't know where that leads." "That's the point," Henry shot back. "Come on, it'll be fun." Against our better judgment, we followed Henry onto the unmarked trail. The path was narrow, winding through dense clusters of snow-laden trees. The further we went, the quieter it became. Even the sound of our boards cutting through the snow seemed muted, absorbed by the thick forest around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were venturing into something more than we had bargained for. The air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in, their gnarled branches casting jagged shadows on the snow. I glanced at my friends, searching for reassurance, but they seemed just as uneasy. "This is cool," Noah said, his voice wavering slightly. "Right?" "Yeah," I lied, forcing a grin. In reality, every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn back. But Henry was already ahead of us, his figure barely visible through the trees. There was no turning back now. As we pressed on, the trail grew steeper, the snow beneath our boards turning into a mix of ice and loose powder. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a warning. My heart pounded as I fought to maintain control, the thrill of adventure quickly giving way to fear. For the first time that day, I wondered if we had made a mistake. The unmarked trail had seemed like an exciting detour, but now it felt like a descent into the unknown, a descent we might not be prepared for. The air was heavy with an unshakable tension, and the once beautiful forest now felt like a labyrinth, its towering trees hiding secrets that we weren't meant to uncover. And so we kept going, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us with every turn. What had started as a snowy adventure was slowly transforming into something far more sinister. The lifts were about to close, and the golden glow of the setting sun bathed the mountain in hues of amber and crimson. We stood at the top, catching our breath, debating which trail should be our grand finale for the day. The air was biting, but the exhilaration of the day's runs kept our spirits high. As we argued over whether to take an easier route or tackle one last black diamond, two girls appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The sight of them silenced us. They were strikingly beautiful, their features almost ethereal against the backdrop of the snowy landscape. Both were bundled in stylish snow gear that somehow seemed more fashionable than functional. They approached us with a confident stride, as if they'd known us forever. "You guys look like you're having fun," one of them said with a sly smile. She had piercing blue eyes and a playful energy that seemed to radiate off her. "I'm Mia, and this is Paige." We introduced ourselves, exchanging awkward but friendly laughs. Their timing was uncanny, and though we didn't say it out loud, all of us were caught off guard. Strangers rarely struck up conversations like this on the mountain, especially not as casually as they did. Paige, who had a sharper edge to her demeanor, quickly honed in on Noah. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she peppered him with technical questions about his high-end snowboard. She clearly knew her stuff, and her admiration seemed genuine, which only made Noah more animated in his responses. Meanwhile, Mia's attention flitted between all of us, teasing us about our impromptu whiskey breaks. "Whiskey on the slopes. Bold choice," she said, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow. Then, almost like a challenge, she reached into her jacket and pulled out an unmarked bottle filled with a golden liquid. "But can you handle this?" Her tone was playful, but there was an edge to it that made me hesitate. The bottle gleamed in the dim light, and I couldn't help but notice how tightly she gripped it. Something about it, about her, felt off. But before I could overthink it, Liam, ever the flirt, accepted her dare. "What's this?" he asked, grinning as he took the bottle. "Some kind of homemade magic potion?" Mia laughed, a melodic sound that seemed almost too perfect. "Something like that," she replied cryptically. Liam took a swig, wincing slightly as the liquid went down. "Smooth," he managed, though his voice betrayed a hint of discomfort. Mia's smile widened, and for a moment, it felt like she knew something we didn't. Paige then mentioned a hidden trail called Phantom's Hollow. "It's not on any map," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "It's a secluded glade. Almost no one knows about it, and it's rarely open to the public. The snow there is untouched, perfect for a final run." The way she described it made it sound both exhilarating and dangerous. It was exactly the kind of challenge that Henry and Liam couldn't resist. "Let's do it," Henry said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Logan and I exchanged skeptical glances. Something about this felt wrong. Trails weren't supposed to be secret. If this Phantom's Hollow was so incredible, why wasn't it more widely known? And why were these two strangers so eager to lead us there? "Are you sure this is legit?" I asked Mia, trying to keep my tone light. Trust me, she said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You won't regret it. Against our better judgment, we agreed to follow them. They led us to a remote section of the mountain, far from the main trails. The walk was longer than I'd anticipated, and before long, the familiar hum of the chairlifts and the chatter of other snowboarders faded into silence. The only sounds were the crunch of our boots on the snow and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. We reached the edge of the marked trails, where the girls pointed to a narrow path leading uphill. It wasn't a trail in the traditional sense. It looked more like a game trail, the kind of thing you'd expect to see in the middle of the woods. We'd have to hike to reach it, they said. The untouched snow sparkled under the fading light, and the eerie stillness of the woods gave the area an almost otherworldly quality. Henry and Liam seemed unfazed, their excitement outweighing any reservations. Noah, too, appeared eager, caught up in Paige's enthusiasm. Logan and I, on the other hand, couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Trails didn't require hiking to access, and the deeper we ventured, the more it felt like we were leaving the safety of the mountain behind. Are we seriously doing this? I whispered to Logan. It's 4 against 2, he muttered back. What could they possibly do? I wanted to believe him, but something about this whole situation felt off. Mia and Paige moved with a purpose, their steps sure and unhesitating. It was as if they'd done this 100 times before. Every now and then, Mia would glance back at us, her expression unreadable. Finally, we reached the top of a small ridge. The girls stopped, and Mia gestured toward a clearing just ahead. Phantom's Hollow, she said softly, her voice almost reverent. The sight was breathtaking. The snow was pristine, untouched by human hands. The trees formed a natural archway, their branches heavy with snow. It was beautiful, but there was something about it that felt wrong. The silence was oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Ready? Paige asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Henry and Liam nodded eagerly, already strapping on their boards. Noah hesitated for a moment, glancing at me and Logan. Let's just get this over with, I said, forcing a grin. But deep down, I knew we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. We reached what Mia and Paige claimed was Phantom's Hollow. The trail stretched ahead, untouched and shimmering under the faint moonlight. It was breathtaking, but the beauty did little to calm the growing unease clawing at my chest. As we paused to adjust our boards, Mia handed the unmarked bottle around again, her smile too wide, too eager. A little courage for the ride, she said with a teasing lilt. Logan hesitated, his brows furrowing as he stared at the bottle. Riley, ever the people-pleaser, laughed and nudged him. Come on, man. It's just a sip. We're all doing it, Riley coaxed, his voice light-hearted but insistent. Reluctantly, Logan took a small swig, wincing as he handed it back. When the bottle reached me, I held it up and tipped it against my lips, but I didn't swallow. My instincts screamed at me to stay cautious. Something about Mia and Paige's behavior was off. Their enthusiasm too calculated, their smiles too sharp. Satisfied, Mia tucked the bottle back into her jacket. All right, boys, let's see if you can keep up, she said, her voice a challenge as she darted down the slope. Paige followed, her laughter echoing through the trees. Noah and Liam were quick to give chase, their competitive streaks overriding any sense of caution. That left Logan and me to bring up the rear, exchanging uneasy glances as we strapped on our boards. The descent was chaotic. The glade was dense, the trees tightly packed, and the snow uneven. Navigating required razor-sharp focus. My heart pounded with every twist and turn, the narrow gaps between the trees feeling impossibly tight. Logan's occasional curses from behind told me he was struggling too. The laughter of the girls and our friends rang out ahead, but it sounded distant, almost distorted, as if the forest itself was swallowing the sound. When we finally reached the bottom, the others were already there, laughing and chatting like nothing was amiss. But as I looked around, my stomach dropped. The area was vast, a sea of untouched snow surrounded by towering pines, But there was one glaring problem. No lift in sight. No trails. No markers. Just us and an endless expanse of forest. "Where's the lift?" I demanded, my voice sharp. Mia's smile didn't falter. "Relax," she said smoothly. "It's not far. Let's take a breather first." Her casual dismissal sent a wave of irritation through me. I glanced at Logan, whose frown mirrored my own. Paige and Mia exchanged a glance that was too quick, too knowing. Before I could press further, Noah staggered, then crumpled to the ground. The laughter died instantly. "Noah?" Liam's voice was panicked as he dropped to his knees beside him. But before he could do anything, his body swayed, and he collapsed next to Noah, his snowboard clattering onto the snow. Cold panic seized me. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice cracking. Mia and Paige didn't answer. Instead, they stared at me, their expressions shifting from surprise to frustration. "He didn't drink enough," Paige muttered, her tone laced with annoyance. "No matter," Mia replied, shrugging. "He'll drop soon enough." It hit me like a punch to the gut. The bottle. They drugged us. I could feel the effects creeping in now, my limbs growing heavy, my vision blurring at the edges. Logan tried to stand but collapsed moments later, his body hitting the snow with a dull thud. I swayed, willing myself to stay upright. My legs felt like lead, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears, but I refused to go down. "Not yet." "Why are you doing this?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. Mia's eyes narrowed. "You should have just played along," she said coldly. With that, she and Paige turned and walked away, dragging Noah and Liam's snowboards with them. I watched, helpless, as they disappeared into the trees. Their silhouettes were soon joined by others, men, shadowy figures loading the boards into the back of a van parked just beyond the tree line. One of the men pointed in my direction, and an argument broke out. Though I couldn't hear the words, their gestures made it clear they were debating whether to come after me. My pulse quickened as I stumbled backward, trying to put distance between us. Finally, they seemed to decide I wasn't worth the trouble. The van doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped off, leaving a cloud of exhaust hanging in the cold air. I collapsed next to Logan, who was beginning to stir. "Wake up," I hissed, shaking his shoulder. "We have to get out of here." It took what felt like an eternity to rouse the others. Noah and Liam were groggy and disoriented, their faces pale and their movements sluggish. Together, we stumbled back toward the main resort, the journey a blur of pain and exhaustion. Every step felt like a battle against my own body, but the fear driving me forward was stronger than the drug's grip. When we finally made it back, the resort staff called the police. Officers arrived within the hour, taking our statements and examining the bottle Mia had left behind. The story made the local news, a warning to other snowboarders to stay vigilant. Despite the publicity, the culprits were never caught. The van, the men, Mia and Paige, they all vanished without a trace. Even now, years later, the memory haunts me. I often wonder what their true intentions were. Were they simply thieves? Or was there something darker at play? I'll never know. But one thing is certain. That night, we came far too close to a nightmare we might not have escaped.